Welcome to Fun and Games Side Quests. Every episode is a different host sharing a video game they love and why they love it.
Hello world and welcome to Side Quests by Fun and Games Podcast. I'm your host, Jala-chan, she, her, also known as Jala-chan in places. You can find me anywhere I may be found at Jala-chan, including Jala-chan.place, where you can find my podcast, which is oh so creatively called Jala-chan's Place. I have a brand, folks, and it's consistent, what can I say? Jala-chan's Place is a bi-weekly show where I handpick 1 to 3 lovely friends to take a deep dive on 2 things each month. One is a piece of media, such as a video game, movie, or book, and the other is a real-life, super important topic that is tricky to grapple with. Examples include Who Framed Roger Rabbit, Metroid Fusion, and Murder on the Orient Express, to name some back episodes of media, and topics such as body dysmorphia and gender dysphoria, what it's like being a first-generation American, and death positivity, which is, by the way, a very funny episode. The show includes an academic segment, as well as a series of experiential questions aimed at providing everyone recording the show, as well as the listeners, with something to reflect on to deepen our understanding of ourselves, each other, and the stuff we enjoy. You can also catch me as a rotating host on DuckFeed's The Level Podcast, a weekly video game roundtable show where we discuss what we've been playing, post a multiplayer question to listeners, and discuss gaming news articles that interest us. Today, I want to tell you all about a little old PlayStation game called Azure Dreams, developed and published by Konami in 1998. This is nominally an RPG, but boy, is it a total weirdo. This game is delineated into roguelike dungeon crawler sections with Pokemon-like monster hunting and training, town building, and dating sim segments. I was totally obsessed with it when I first played it, and I'm hoping I can explain what's so stand out about it here on my TED Talk. So, in this game, you play a boy named Ko, whose father was a monster hunter living in Monsibaya, a town that grew up around a monster tower filled with magical critters that serve not only as pets and companions, but also form the cornerstone of the entire economy. Guy, yes, that's really the name they give your dad, went into the monster tower one day and was never seen again. This fills Ko with an urge to follow in his father's footsteps and enter the tower once he comes of age, because if your dad disappears never to return, it's definitely a good idea to do the same thing as soon as you hit puberty. The day finally arrives, and Ko turns 15. He goes into the tower and meets a critter named Cuny, who looks a lot like Sonic and speaks human language. Cuny, who, for better or worse, is not a snot-nosed punk like Sonic, tells you he was Guy's familiar, but was separated from him on the roof. The two of you resolve to reach the top floor and hopefully discover what happened to Guy. It's not as easy as just rocketing up a million flights of steps, though. Each 5 or so floors, the difficulty ramps up and stronger monsters block your path. It takes many, many trips to the tower and return trips home to make it. Re-entering the tower also has its tricks. When Ko crosses over the threshold, he starts over at level 1 every time. His familiars, however, hatched back at his home in Monsibaya from eggs that he finds on his journey through the tower, retain their levels and abilities. He can furthermore only bring 5 items with him, and his familiars all count as items. So, in my runs, I would often do 1 or 2 familiars, a weapon, a shield, and maybe a wind crystal to return home, or a pita fruit to rejuvenate my familiar's energy. Inside the tower, only certain floors remain the same. Everything else changes each time you return. You can only have 1 familiar out at a time for a good half of the game until you get a second caller, but you can switch between familiars if you brought more than one along with you. There are monsters to fight, treasures to nab, and tons of traps to spice things up. The movement of everything in the tower hinges on your movement. That is to say, this is turn-based. Every time you take a step, everything else on the floor also takes a step or performs an action. This means that the game can be as fast or as slow as you desire depending upon your inputs. This is critical to enjoying the game, in my opinion, because you can stop to think up your strategy and not worry about being sneak attacked while considering your options. And because I love exploration, I was absolutely always on a floor that was a lot harder than I was supposed to be on, so strategy becomes really, really important when you are overstretching yourself. So also, another thing to consider is that your elevation matters to your attack and defense, And the traps that can royally screw you over can also endanger your enemies if they happen to trigger them first. There is an item that you can get that allows you to see where all the traps are, so you can actually use that to your advantage in a lot of different situations as you keep on going through the tower. When you die inside the tower, you start back at home without any of the items that you collected, so that kind of sucks, but that's the nature of a roguelike, you know? Your familiars, though, just like Pokemon, have elements that are associated with them, so it's fire, wind, and water, which is kind of like a weapon triangle from Fire Emblem. Another consideration is the fact that you have your weapon and your shield, and these things can be leveled up using a type of sand that you find in the tower. Now, there are rust traps that will lower the weapon attack and lower the defense of the shield. So that's something to keep in mind. For me, what I found to be the best option would be to get a training wand and eventually a diamond shield. Neither of those is affected by that rust trap, and then just buffing the crap out of that. So Jala's advice there is save all of your sands until you can get those items, and then just buff the crap out of those once you can. It will be wonderful, I promise you. Anyway, back in Monsipaya, the town where you live and spend your time when you're not in the tower, you end up building up the town itself, which has fallen on hard times because ever since Guy went into the tower and disappeared, like the entire economy basically crashed because he was the best one. And, you know, like the tourism of it kind of was no longer a fun thing when dude just up and vanished. You can also remodel and redecorate your house and build up your relationships with several different ladies in the town, as well as with Gauche, who is your rival. These periods of role-playing, dating sim, and general derping around in town really do feel refreshing after the tactical, randomized encounters you face in the tower. So I didn't find myself bored with the town segments until closer to the end, when you have a lot less to do in town. Once you basically have resolved the issues of the town, you're super rich and you have everything you could ever want. Your house is as big as it's ever going to get, and so on and so forth. So there are some critiques that I have of this game as well. Everybody who knows me from the level and my own show know that I talk my sugar, but I also talk my spice and salt. So the town elements are definitely more enjoyable on your first run and during the first 2/3 more than the last bit closer to endgame. The dating sim parts are a weird and fun element to a roguelike critter game, but because this is an older title, that aspect isn't as fully realized as later games would be. So, you know, just keep that in mind whenever you do play this game, should I entice you to play it, that the dating sim is kind of Cro-Magnon by comparison to the things that dating sims have been doing ever since. The first hour or so of this game is a slow and sloggy affair, at least in my mind, because it has a mandatory tutorial. Jala-chan does not approve mandatory tutorials, but that was the style of the time. So unfortunately, it exists here. So it slows it up. You learn everything very, very slowly. You're trying to, like, I just want to go run around and beat stuff up, but you can't do that until after the game teaches you what you're doing. I will say, though, that the tutorial is rather necessary on your first playthrough of the game to really explain to you what all the moving parts are. I just really hate tutorials, but that's neither here nor there. So what's my history with this game? I first played it when I was going to college full-time and working full-time. I only ever caught naps between things, but somehow I managed to log tons and tons of hours on this game. I would get home from work at 2:00 in the morning and play until I passed out. And I would often share time on the game with my boyfriend of the time. And we would just save on the same save file. And I would play a little bit until I started getting sleepy, and then I would pass out. And then he would play a little bit, and then he would get sleepy right about the time that I woke up, and then he would pass out. And we just pass it back and forth and nap, because that's about as much sleep as I ever got during those times. So, what did I enjoy most about Azure Dreams that made me stay up and play this game when I wasn't getting enough sleep? Well, while I did spend a solid 60 hours on any of my given playthroughs, it's because I really love the exploring and the tactical elements of the tower. How Long to Beat places this at anywhere from 27.5 to 46 hours. It's a solid game length without overstaying its welcome. The randomized elements mean you never know what each floor is going to be like. The combination of goodies and critters and elemental types and elevations and traps is the perfect mix of factors without feeling like too much. That's something that I have a gripe about Pokemon, at least in the current iterations. It's just that there's so many legacy systems that they're pulling forward from game to game, and you don't actually have to engage with any of those systems in those games. And here it's kind of like the distilled down to just the critter parts with a few other random bits that are thrown in just for the funsies that are just kind of a nice break from doing the critter bits. Anyway, anytime you hit a new set of floors, the tower theme music and the textures and the colors of the level change, and you eternally have this, oh shit, am I in trouble feeling of risk and thrill, because one wrong move will actually kill you and wipe that run. And to me, this was absolutely fantastic. It heightened the sense of meaning to every single decision that I was making once I was at those higher level floors, since you couldn't save scum because this was PlayStation 1. But if any of you guys end up picking up this game and playing it, you're probably going to be emulating it because it does not exist on modern systems. You can only play the original PlayStation version or download a ROM. That's how that goes, unfortunately, with so many older video games. Anyhow, some more Pokemon comparison. Unlike in Pokemon, you don't find new monster eggs all the time, so it's not like in Pokemon where it's like, and there's a Pokemon, and there's a Pokemon, and I caught another one, and another one. There's 7 bajillion of them. It's not like that. You get eggs every once in a while, and when you do find them, you get really excited, and then you can't wait to go back home to Monsibaya to hatch those eggs. You can hatch them in the tower if you want to take the risk of getting something really cool and then not being able to keep it. If you hatch it in the tower and it's not in your house, then it will just go away once you leave the tower. Of course, that means that if you hatch it and you're in your house, then it is your critter forever to be added to your loadout whenever you go back into the tower. So let me tell you a few stories about some stuff that would happen when I was in the tower and risking everything by going to a floor that was way higher than my current level. So in some cases, I might step on a monster trap and summon like 10 monsters into the room I was in, but then remember that I had an acid rain ball, which is like a magic item that you can use that does a big AoE that pretty much one-shots everything. And you use that, and then you're like, oh yeah, because everything in the room just dies, and you get all of this XP, and it's just this great feeling. You're just like, yes, I have cheated death another day. Ha ha. But then other times I would be standing in place in a room trying to heal from the last big bad monster that I barely escaped from, and letting time pass, right? And I'm sitting there and I'm just like, please don't let anything come into this room. If it comes into this room, I'm going to die in a single hit. This will suck. I will lose everything. No, no, no. And then the little critters would come up to the door, but then turn around. Like the AI would just have it turn around. And I'm like, yes. Or even better, they would come into the room and then it turns out that there was a trap somewhere on the floor, and then they trigger it and then they die instantly, or in some cases they would get paralyzed, and then I'd go over there real quick and then like wail on it with my 1 HP that I would do damage, you know, because I'm so low level compared to the stuff I'm fighting, and eventually kill it and go, yes, I did it somehow, and then immediately leave because there was no way I was going to risk any further adventuring at that time. And so anyway, there were definitely times where I made the wrong move and wiped and had to try again, but those don't linger in my memory as much as those exciting triumphs. I've said on the level so many times that I wish Pokemon had a hard mode, and Azure Dreams is essentially that with, again, those other game genres thrown in for the shits and giggles. So it's a solid early PS1 title that not a lot of folks have played, and it's sadly, as I mentioned before, not available on modern consoles, and that sucks. So I definitely recommend that you do go through the trouble of finding that ROM or tracking down that PlayStation 1 disc, because it is a really good game that is a fun time once you get past that tutorial. Bleh. And yeah, I still have a great time with it every single time I boot it up. This is essentially what I want out of a Pokemon game, but it unfortunately never went anywhere. This was this one weird Konami jag from a million years ago, back in internet dial-up days, and then that was it. Like, there was a Game Boy Color version released 2 years after the PS1 original, and I played it, but it was not as fun to me. It's missing the town parts. The tower doesn't feel as creepy on that simpler and more limited system. They do have some other added critters and things like that, but it just doesn't have the same feel as the PlayStation 1 version. This game did have a spiritual successor in the form of Tao's Adventure, Curse of the Demon Seal, released on the Nintendo DS in 2005, but it's reportedly not very good. I never bothered to play it because I didn't want my heart broken. Anyway, it is a truly memorable and unique experience that I wish more people were familiar with. So, yeah, go and check this out. It's pretty cool. Anyhow, I hope you all enjoyed hearing about Azure Dreams. Thanks to Matt and Jeff for letting me take over a mini-sode. And until next time, take care of yourself, remember to smile, and happy gaming!
Do you feel like you're the only person in your circle who wants to go deep about video games regularly?
We were like that too. Until now.
Welcome to Crossplay Conversations, the brand new bi-weekly topical video game podcast from Luke Lewis,
Joseph Hooper,
and Jacob McCord.
With many years of breaking it down separately on shows like the Left Behind Game Club, Player Podcast, and Lukewarm Games, the gang is finally coming together to publish their gaming group chat in audio form every other week.
Expect roundtable reviews of the latest games, profiles of upcoming indies, and insightful conversations about essential topics in the video game industry. All with a mostly positive, insightful, and fun style.
Crossplay Conversations debuts on August 1st with brand new episodes hitting every other Tuesday. Help us out by subscribing on your podcast platform of choice to get the first episodes delivered straight to your feed.
And follow us on Twitter at Crossplay Convos for updates about the show.
Cheers and happy gaming.
CPOV. CertainPOV.com.